Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yantah pravishya mama vachim mama prasutam sanjeevayate kiva shaktidaram svadam anyam shahasta charanam shravanam bhagari pranam namo bhagavate purushaya tutyam svasyastu vishwasya kalah prasidatam jayantu buddhani shivam nidodhya manascha badram ajatata doksha jaya shritam namathira. So, I'm very happy to be with all of you this evening for this program. I don't know how adventurous it will be, but I will try to share with you some of my experience and the reasons why I practice Krishna consciousness and what it gives to me, and also maybe tell something about how Russian people perceive Vedic culture, Indian culture, and ultimately how Vedic culture is the answer to all our questions. Is the solution, or gives the solution, has the solution for so many problems which we face. Actually, we are in a very critical time of human history, especially within the last years, maybe last 20, 30 years. The human history takes a very drastic development. Whether it's development or degradation remains to be seen, but the situation is very, very tense everywhere, politically, economically, and ecologically. Honestly speaking, the whole humanity is in a crisis. Because the solutions which modern civilization gives to people actually only complicate things. Albert Einstein, one of the greatest scientists of the last century, he said that you cannot really solve the problem from the same level of consciousness which created the problem. And unfortunately, this is exactly what people are trying to do. The exact same thing was written 5,000 years ago in Bhagavata Purana or in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj says this, that people give solution to their problems. They try to solve the problems, but the solutions are worse than the problem itself. And that's what we see. You know, to any problem which we have, modern people try to find solution, but oftentimes, or practically all the time, solution is worse than the problem itself. I will not quote contemporary situation to be politically correct, but if we impartially look at what is going on in the world, we will be able to see that this is going on, and the whole development of this race, trying to find solution to all the problems and complicating the situation more and more and more, has become over the last few dozens of years very, very, very dramatical. New solutions are coming, but it creates so many new problems. And that's like a snowball. Of course, in India, you don't know what is snowball. But snowball, the ball is rolling, and it's becoming more and more because it accumulates more and more snow, and ultimately the whole thing collapses. So let's go a little back into history. I joined, as is what said, to Krishna consciousness movement in 1980, many years back, 40 plus years back. And at that time I was scientist, and I was firmly believing in science. I was programmed from my childhood that science will give all the solutions to all our problems, as practically all the people in the modern world, or majority of people in the modern world. Honestly speaking, science now is a religion, and scientists are priests of this religion. They are the people who keep this cult, scientism. This is the religion of scientism. And keeping this religion intact and trying to, promote this religion. Promising that whatever you need, we will give you a solution. Now you have this virus problem, we will make some vaccine to this virus problem, and so on and so forth. So that's a religion which we have now, and the traditional forms of religion are becoming less and less popular, especially in the West. And in some countries, people, they try to declare boldly that there is no God and God is not necessary. In 19th century, at the end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, Friedrich Nietzsche in Germany, he said, God is dead. Of course, now Nietzsche is dead, God is still there. But he declared very boldly, God is dead. It means basically we don't need him anymore. Before, people were weak and they were trying to find some shelter in their beliefs in God. But now we're strong and we don't need God. So basically that was the history of Russia. Russia in the beginning of 19th century, of 20th century, declared that there is no God, and that was the official belief. Of course, curiously enough, even with this belief, they couldn't live with somebody to worship, and therefore they worshipped Lenin. They put the dead body of Lenin into mausoleum, and they would come and would have a darshan of that body of Lenin. Whether it would give them some benefit or not, I don't know. I doubt it. But still, the quasi or some sort of religious practice was still going on, because that's the human nature. For 70 years, atheism was the official religion of this country, and you cannot really, you were not allowed to say that there is God, or profess that there is God, preach that there is God. If you would do this, you would be put in prison. Many people throughout this 70 years of history of Russia were put in prison just because of the fact that they believed in God. Many people were killed. Many people were murdered. Russia was, before revolution, before socialist revolution or communist revolution, Russia was quite a religious country. So to eliminate this religious belief in the beginning, immediately after revolution, around 100,000 priests were killed. Tens of thousands of priests were killed just to eradicate the very notion of God. Stalin, the ruler of Russia, dictator in Russia, he declared that by 1930 there will be not a single man who believes in God. Interestingly enough, Stalin himself had a religious education. He graduated from the seminary and he became a very avowed atheist, and he didn't believe in God. So he wanted to completely wipe out the religion. And but despite of all these endeavors, amazingly enough, the religion is still very much there, and now there is a revival of religion. And partially it's because in 1971 Srila Prabhupada came to Russia. Srila Prabhupada, the great emissary of Vedic culture, the person who spread Vedic culture in a very amazing way within a very short span of time of 11 years, he came once to Russia, and he wanted to preach, but he couldn't preach. But still he met one person who was interested in Vedic culture and in yoga, and he was preaching to him. And from this one person, now, as we were told, at least 50,000 practicing people seriously practice Vedic culture, seriously follow, very strictly follow vegetarianism, live very pure life, and chant Hare Krishna mantra. So let's ask us the question. Let's ask the question, what is the secret behind this? Why people from a completely different background, completely different cultural background, completely different upbringing, all of a sudden thousands of people take this culture? If we examine this very minutely and very carefully, we will be able to appreciate the glory of Vedic culture in a better way. Sometimes when we are too familiar with something, we are not really capable of appreciating it properly. It needs to be going to a little distance to appreciate it. It's always like this. You know, if something is too familiar to us, it becomes little, it's taken for granted. You know, of course now it's a very good period in Indian history, and many people are re-establishing this Vedic culture, the glory of Vedic culture. But let's again look from a completely impartial point of view. What is Vedic culture? What it can give to you? Why people all over the world take to Vedic culture and practice Vedic culture so seriously? Again, I'll take my history, my life history as an example. As I said, I was a scientist, and I was believing in science, and I was doing my PhD degree at that time in molecular biology. But a very fundamental questions which every human being has in his heart remain unanswered by science. You know, science has a very peculiar way of explaining things. They say, we already explained this much, and the rest we will explain in the future. Don't worry. Look how much we have already done. This is we already know, and that we already know. But, you know, there are some few things which are still unknown. But in the future, for sure, we will explain it. But these little things which are still not explained, what is the nature of consciousness, how the life appeared in the earth, you know, these little things, you know, they are not answered. Where this universe is coming from, why does it exist, why the laws of nature, the laws of physics are so precisely accurate and so precisely adjusted that the whole universe exists, you know. if we impartially again study this, we will see the very intelligent design behind everything which we see. But the science says, no, this is not a scientific question. Why it is not a scientific question? Simply because science doesn't have an answer to this question. Therefore, it's not scientific. But this is the most important question which everyone has to search, answer for. And the particular question which I was interested, and that's exactly why I was studying molecular biology, I was trying, by studying molecular biology, to find the answer. How this human body and ultimately what is the meaning of life. But to understand what is the meaning of life, you have to understand what is the origin of life. So I was hoping that by studying molecular biology, by studying how the, chemistry, the chemical basis or foundation of life, I will be able to understand what is life. But in my scientific journey, in my scientific exploration, I stumbled upon a very paradoxical phenomenon. What was this paradoxical phenomenon? Yes, I was studying life, but how I was studying life? I was studying life by killing life. To study life, you have to kill something. You cannot really study a living organism. To study, you have to cut it, you have to smash it, you have to extract something. So they were killing and killing and killing, and I was killing and killing and killing. I was killing poor rats. Once Srila Prabhupada was introduced to one scientist. One scientist was brought to Srila Prabhupada for some conversation, and one devotee told Srila Prabhupada, this is a scientist such and such, PhD. Srila Prabhupada looked at him and said, poor frogs. that was his reaction on this introduction. But that's a fact. That's what scientists, biologists, or whatever do. They kill. Of course, there is a noble cause behind it. We kill to save life in the future, but in the meantime, we kill it. So this whole enterprise, the whole idea behind it is very, very destructive. Very destructive. So anyway, I was pondering over this paradoxical phenomena, and in the meantime, I was trying to really understand, is it possible to explain the phenomenon of life through purely chemical laws, through the purely chemical explanations? Are we just a bunch of chemicals? Or there is something more behind this? And while reading, and I was reading all these, theories or all these articles, scientific papers, how the chemical evolution ultimately bring about life. And I found out that they don't know the answer to this question. There is no answer to this question. Because life is so complicated. And how, and the notion behind this whole idea that the life comes from chemicals is that, chemicals by combining with each other ultimately will bring about this extremely complicated structure. But that's totally against the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics say that you cannot really, this is against the second law of thermodynamics, that the simple thing will create more complex thing. The Vedic approach is exactly opposite. Vedas say, yes, all these things which science is speaking about exist, but in the Vedic process of understanding how the world is coming about, it's coming about from more complex things into more simple things. And that's very natural. We are very complex being, and we can create something which is more simple than us. But something which is less complicated, less complex, it cannot, by the process of evolution, becomes more and more complex. It's impossible. It's just against the natural law of thermodynamics. We can take a fruit. It's a nice fruit, fresh mango, and we can put this fresh mango somewhere and wait when it will evolve into something more complex. No, what will happen with mango? It will rot. It will decompose. The process of decomposition is natural. The process of creating more and more complex structure is completely unnatural. It doesn't happen in nature. And, if we see how complex our body is, it's unbelievably complex. I was studying a little bacteria which is called Escherichia coli. It's a bacteria which lives in human intestine and creates some disease. And, scientists, it's a very favorite object of study for scientists. Thousands of scientists study this little bacteria. It's the most simple bacteria ever. Thousands of scientists study this bacteria for at least 100 years, and still they cannot say that they know everything which is going on in this bacteria. But then they say that this bacteria appeared by chance. How is that possible? This little bacteria, one cell organism, living organism, is more complicated than the most complicated computer which we have now. And can computer appear itself? Can we open a computer factory which will be called computer evolution? And there will be nothing there, just natural process will create new and new models of computer. Will it happen? Will this company flourish? Will it be a new brand of computers? No. Something which is more complicated can create something which is less complicated, but something which is less complicated cannot really evolve into something more complicated. So I was completely, totally dissatisfied with the pseudo-scientific answers which were given to very specific questions which were in my mind. How the specific mechanism, I was minutely studying the mechanism of genes and DNA and proteins, and how proteins and DNA interact with each other. So I was wondering how this whole thing appeared. And there is no answer to this question. Besides very vague promise that in the future we will figure it out. But the very initial promise is false. And if we examine very minutely the whole science as an enterprise, we will understand that there is a mistake in the very in the very beginning there is a mistake. There is a foundational mistake in the whole science. And the whole science is basically, that there is no God and everything is just by the natural process of evolution takes place. And if we take now, which is very important, I will come to Vedic adventure a little later in Russia, but it's connected. I'm telling my own story. So after being frustrated in finding the question of the origin of life, I started examining bigger question, which is even more important question. Universal question, which is important for every one of us to answer. What is the nature of our consciousness? This is the foundational question which everyone has to have an answer. And the standard answer to this, consciousness is epiphenomenon, is a result of development of matter. Matter, by developing, ultimately comes to a stage where it becomes conscious. And ultimately, consciousness is a product of the brain. That's an accepted scientific theory. Although there are many scientists who don't believe in this theory, but nevertheless, it's a standard scientific theory. So this standard scientific theory, if we examine it even superficially, it's very strange. You know, the scientists, what they say, that consciousness is the product of the brain. Okay, let's say, forget about this question, how the brain appeared. Let's say brain appeared. Complex brain. In our brain, we have 80 billion cells. Every neuron in our brain, every one of these 80 billion cells, neurons, has a capacity to connect with 2,000, make 2,000 connections with some other cells. So you can imagine 80 billion and 2,000 connections, you know, can you imagine how complex this whole structure is? Okay, it appeared by chance, by the natural evolution. Okay, okay, let's suggest it. But still, nevertheless, this is the most complex computer which every one of us has, which everyone didn't pay a penny for this computer. We pay thousands of dollars to have very, you know, ridiculously primitive computers. This computer we got for free. We didn't do much for this. It's just given as a bonus. You know, but still, you know, how this computer create consciousness? The scientists say, you know, it's so complex that it somehow or other it creates consciousness. You know, that the idea is that you have this brain, and this brain works exactly like the computer. Computer works according to this, you know, system 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So these cells in the brain, they sometimes deactivated, sometimes they deactivated, and through this 0, 1 thing, the very complex thing can appear. But, you know, and they say that as a result of this very complex system, the consciousness appear. But, you know, computer, it's quite complex, but it doesn't have any consciousness. They say, you know, the computer can show you video, right? So in the same way, brain can show you video, right? You see all the pictures in the brain, and you see, but does the computer itself say, I want to see this video now? Does he have this capacity to decide, I want to see this video or that video? I want to run this program, I don't want to run this other program. You know, and they say, you know, that somehow or other consciousness appear, each and every cell, neuron which is there in the brain is not conscious, but when they come together, they somehow or other become conscious. Consciousness appears. It's the same as to say, you know, you have one blind person, and one blind person cannot see, right? You have two blind people, they cannot see. But then you get 20 million blind people, and all of a sudden they can see. No, there's 20 million or 80 billion blind people. They will not be able to see. Each of them is blind. How they will see? How it will appear? It's a completely different quality. It's a completely different phenomena. Consciousness is not a matter of brain. And then, okay, let's say 20 billion people came together, they were blind, all of a sudden they could see. Yeah, but then, you know, which one of them says, I am? You know, which of these neurons claims that he is you? Consciousness means you are, right? Consciousness means I am. You're conscious that you exist. You're conscious that somebody else exists. Which one of these 20 or 80 billion neurons is you? Can you show? The scientists, they study brain very meticulously. They know which area of the brain is responsible for vision. They know which area of the brain is responsible for speaking. They know which area of the brain is responsible for, you know, for the smell and for all other functions. But they still don't know which area of the brain is responsible for saying, I am. Because I am is not physical. And this is where Vedic science starts. And this is where my journey to Vedic culture, or my adventure with Vedic culture started. Because in 1980, for the first time, I read Bhagavad Gita. And the initial idea of Bhagavad Gita, initial thought or initial concept of Bhagavad Gita is that you, the person, you, the consciousness, you who says I am, is different from the body. This is where Bhagavad Gita starts. And this was said or established or practiced thousands of years back. And Krishna says this. He says, this is the simple mistake which you do. He's saying this to Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. And he says, all your problems because you confuse yourself with this body. And when I heard this, when I understood or realized this, I thought, that's an interesting idea. Let's explore it. There is something to it. There is something which can make a difference. Because, you know, all other ideas, they obviously don't work. I was not convinced about the material origin of life. I was totally not convinced about the material origin of the consciousness. And all of a sudden, like a flash of lightning, this idea, you're not this body, has come from this little book. Bhagavad Gita is an amazing book. Bhagavad Gita is a very short book, only 700 verses, but within this short book, in a very beautiful and comprehensive way, the completely new worldview is described. New for me as an atheist. And I'm sure new for many of you if you try to read Bhagavad Gita in an impartial way. The problem of Indian people is that they think they know what is Indian culture. That's the biggest problem. Because when you think you know, it deprives you the chance to know it. If your knowledge is not complete, if your knowledge is not really comprehensive, it's difficult to know. I had an advantage. I didn't think I knew what it is all about. So I read Bhagavad Gita impartially and I was completely amazed. I was completely amazed how from this idea, from this basic foundational idea that you're not this body, the whole complex but very harmonious and very interrelated and comprehensive picture of the world was developed. Of course, at one point, Krishna introduced not only non-material origin of human consciousness, but he also introduced himself as the origin of life. But that was also very logical. So what I want to say is that Vedic culture gives the solution to all our problems by discovering the initial mistake which we all do. And this initial mistake, which we all do, the mistake which is very unnoticeable mistake, very natural mistake. Because to think I'm this body, nothing is more natural, isn't it? It's a very natural idea, right? Born with the natural idea, we don't question this idea. So in the time of crisis, we have to question this foundational idea of the whole modern civilization. I started with this. Now it's a very dramatic time. It's a critical time. It's a time of crisis. It's the time of crisis. We have to really go back to the basics and understand what is the basic idea behind this culture which is collapsing now. This whole culture which we have, as glowing as it may seem, as strong as it may think, and now unfortunately India follows the footsteps of the West. This whole idea of materialistic culture is developed and perfected in the West, but India unfortunately follows very speedily and thinks that this is the solution to all the questions. They think that this is the solution, this is the way, but no, this is not. So this culture, as convincing as it may look from outside, is actually very rotten internally, because it has the foundational mistake and it creates a completely wrong consciousness in people. The problem of our civilization is that by developing this idea, which initially seemed to be very promising, the scientific idea. It started sometime in the 18th century in Europe, where they rejected God and started exploring science. This idea initially promised that it will make everyone happy. But this is a very tragic mistake. It will not make anyone happy. And the sooner we realize this, the better life we will conduct. Because the life of materialistic people ultimately brings about immense anxiety in his life, brings about immense worries, brings about total dissatisfaction, frustration of everything. So what I'm telling now, that I took this Vedic culture because I thought that this is a good idea to try to find a solution for my problems. But the more I practice, the more I see the world around, the more I study the environment, the more I study the situation of the world, the more I am convinced that this is the solution not only for my personal problem, not only for every one of yours personal problem. It's the solution for the problem of the whole humanity. There was a great historian, British historian, Arnold Toynbee, and he was a very big fan of India. He wrote this book, India as it was, lamenting about the demise of glorious Vedic culture. He wrote this book, and he said that the 20th century was the century which was dominated by Western culture. But he says that actually either we will have future or we will not have future, and the future is to find the solutions in Vedic culture. The real history of humanity may start if we really turn to Vedic culture for all the solutions and try to study Vedic culture very impartially. I try to see what is Vedic culture giving to us, and for that we should take a very simple and foundational book, Bhagavad Gita. Glory of Srila Prabhupada, who preached this Vedic culture all over the world, is in his ability to explain Bhagavad Gita in a very simple way, but at the same time in a very logical and convincing way. So that anyone who can read Bhagavad Gita as it is, written by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he will be able to appreciate this Vedic culture and how Vedic culture gives the solution to all the problems. So I started my journey in 1980, and 40 years later I'm still in this journey to find the real solution to this question, who I am. You know, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna first states, it's very important, first he states that you're not this body. But then he gives a very difficult proposition, how to realize that you're not this body. It's not enough to say, I'm not this body. It's not enough to preach that you're not this body. I've been preaching for a long time. I know it's not enough. It's not enough to repeat it as mantra. I am not this body, I am not this body, I am not this body. You know, you have to really realize you're not this body, because at the time of death, you either will be able to be completely composed and peaceful, knowing that you're just being transferred into some other better destination that you are now, or you will be in complete turmoil and in complete drama. You will be trying to cling for the life. Srila Prabhupada used to give an example of one of his friends who was dying in a hospital, and he was saying, "Doctor, please give me 2 more weeks. Please give me 2 more weeks." You know, it means that most of the people who live this life of the modern civilization based on the wrong ideas, on the foundationally wrong ideas, that they ultimately not prepared to leave this body. Just today, I was speaking with one Russian devotee, one Russian person. He is quite old and he's very sick. And he has been sick for many, many years. You know, there is a pain all over his body. It's so painful. He cannot sleep without painkillers. You know, he can hardly walk. You know, before his hands stopped working. Now his legs stopped working because, you know, if every step is just tremendous pain. And he told me a very interesting thing. He said to me today, he said to me, "Please tell me whether I'm wrong or right. I'm very sick, I'm suffering too much, but I'm very peaceful. Am I wrong or am I right?" I said, "I wish I could say the same about myself." He said it with such a conviction and such a realization. I'm very peaceful. I'm very happy. You know, can you imagine the person in such a condition, you know, saying that he's very happy and he's very peaceful? When we have little disease, you know, little fever is going on, a little virus is coming, are we peaceful? Are we happy? No, we're not happy. We are in complete anxiety. Why he's happy? Why he's peaceful? Because he realized the fact, he is not this body. So Krishna, he not only establishes this fact, not only proves that these facts can give you a completely logical understanding of the world and what is going on, Krishna also explains how we can realize that I'm not this body. Krishna says that you should, if you want to realize that you're not this body, somebody wants to realize that you're not this body? Who wants to realize that you're not this body? Okay. So we should stop reinforcing this idea again and again and again on a daily basis. The problem with this idea that I am this body, and when I will die, everything will die with myself, and this will be the worst tragedy in my life, and so on and so forth. So the problem with this idea is that it's not just an idea, it's something which we reinforce again and again and again many times during the day. When we interact with this world, and when we interact with this world, programming ourselves that through this interaction with the world, I will become happy. In this way, we are more or less again and again reinforcing this idea within our consciousness, within our heart. The whole idea is that, that somehow or other, by interacting with this matter, I, the spirit, can be happy, is a completely mistaken idea. Because the spirit cannot be happy by interacting with matter. People think if I have a lot of matter around myself, I will be happy, right? If I get a lot of rupees at the end of the month, I will be happy. No, you will not be happy. By these rupees, I will buy this and I will buy that. No, but this is not the way to be happy. So Krishna says, if you want to realize this idea, that you're not this body, if you want to be prepared to the moment of death, if you want to be happy at the moment of death, and smile and say, yes, I'm prepared, I'm ready to go, you should start practicing it now. How? By not being attached to the results which your work brings to you. Because we all work like asses, or sometimes like camels, sometimes like dogs. Well, of course, dogs, especially in Bangalore, they have a very lucrative life. They have plenty to eat and they mostly sleep. So dogs here are very lazy fellow. In Vrindavan, where I live, the dogs are much more laborious. They work hard. But anyway, so the idea which Krishna gives in the beginning, he says, you're not this body. How to prove scientifically, how to realize this idea, we should try gradually to be detached from the fruits of our work. And how we can be detached from the fruits of our work, for that we have to understand that it's not the fruits of our work which will make us happy. We are attached to the fruits of our work because we think that it's the fruits of our work which will make us happy. I will achieve this result, and I will be promoted to this, and I will get that much in a salary, and I will get this degree and that degree, and all of a sudden I will become happy. Just imagine that you already have all these degrees. Will you be happy or not? Just make this experiment, mental experiment. You already have everything. Will you be happy? I remember I once was speaking with one Indian. He was very scientifically minded Indian. And I asked him, we were talking about this matter. And I asked him, who's your hero? He said, Mukesh, what's his name, Mukesh? Ambani. Mukesh Ambani is my hero. This is the one who made this Jio? Jio, yeah, he said. Because, he made this Jio. He made this Jio. I said, just imagine that you made this Jio. Just make this, okay, after initial excitement, which you get, does it really change your life? Will it really change your life? Be honest, he said. Probably not. I probably will have the same problems which I have now. Yes, any achievement gives us little initial excitement. Yes, it's good. Yes, I'm now, yeah, right. But how long this excitement lasts? You fulfill some of your desire. Let's say you get Mercedes car. I don't know which is the most fashionable car in India. Or whatever, Tata car. Or auto rickshaw, I don't know. Whatever is your cherished dream. Yeah, it will give you some little excitement in the beginning. You will drive this car and you will look at others, see how big I am and how great I am. But after some time, you will be the same. You will have the same problems as you have. It will not solve your problems. So to realize that you are not this body, which is crucial not to commit mistakes. Because if we think we are this body, we will commit one mistake after another. And we will regret about this mistake. We will do violence. We will somehow or other, we will try to establish our domination over the survey which we have, lording it over, material nature. But we will commit one mistake after another, after another. So, but how to be established in this idea, I am not this body? For this, we have to very clearly understand that I will not become happy. I, the soul, will not become happy by all this material advancement, by all these material arrangements. I individually will not become happy. The whole humanity will not become happy, no matter how much material advancement will be there. You may go to Mars. What you will do in Mars? People, they think, if we go to Mars, that will be great. What you will do in Mars? You will do the same thing in Mars. You will try to enjoy your senses. You will eat and you will sleep in Mars. So don't go to Mars. Don't save some energy and money. No need to go to Mars. No need to go to Moon. Stay in Bangalore. But try to realize who you are and what will make you happy. Because if you get the right idea how to become happy, you will not commit mistakes. If you understand that I am the soul and my happiness lies in the connection with God, in the relationship with God, this is the happiness which is there. If you understand this, then the detachment to the fruits of your action will come automatically, because you will not endeavor so hard for them. We're endeavoring so hard for the fruits of our action only because we think they will make me happy. This is the way to live in this world. This is the only way to live in this world. This is the only right way to live in this world. Yes, you need fruits of your action. You need all this achievement, but don't be attached to them. Your attachment, but we cannot be not attached to anything, right? We are attached by nature. If we don't have anything to be attached, we will be attached to a dog or to a whatever little thing which is there. But the point is that not to be attached to dog, not to be attached to the fruits of your action. The point is to become attached to God. And if this is the goal, and if you very consistently try to achieve this goal, then you will live a very nice, pure life. You will not commit many mistakes. Now, you will still commit quite a few mistakes. Don't worry about this. That's a human nature. But you will not commit too gross mistakes, which you will regret very bitterly. And gradually, this understanding or this realization, I am not this body, will come to you. when we will stop reinforcing this idea by getting more and more attached to the fruits of our actions. You know, this world is full of people who give you advice how to become happy. And I'm one of them. You know. So many solutions are there. Everyone is an expert. Everyone is teaching others how to become happy. Somebody says you drink the carrot juice every day and you become happy. Somebody says, no, amla juice is better. Or loki juice, or whatever. Or somebody says, do this exercise. Or somebody says, do this or do that. But do really people know how to become happy? Do they really prove how to become happy? Srila Prabhupada, he proved he was happy. At the end of his life, when his body was completely dysfunctional, and he could hardly move his tongue, he was still happy. He was still caring about others. He was still taking care of other people. And he was still translating Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic literature. That's Vedic culture. That's glorious Vedic culture. Vedic culture teaches you how to live in this world, and Vedic culture teaches you how to prepare for the next life. How to live this life properly, how to live this life with dignity as a human being, without wasting time, without committing gross mistakes. And at the same time, Vedic culture teaches you how to evolve. This whole notion of evolution, which is very much foundational to the Western culture and unfortunately now to Indian culture, is also there in Vedic literature. We should evolve. We have to evolve. That's the human nature. That's the nature of the spirit. How to evolve? By developing our relationship with God. Through chanting this Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So that's Vedic adventure. Vedic adventure is that you try to think deeply about the fundamental questions and not to be in a hurry to give the solution to these questions. Bhagavad Gita really allows to be examined very thoroughly. Bhagavad Gita doesn't demand blind faith. If you go to some other religion, ultimately you will be told, just believe. Just believe. If you don't believe, you're doomed. If you don't believe, you will go to hell. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, no, let's examine this. Let's talk. You will go to hell, don't worry. But let's first examine what the life is all about. Let's examine what is the truth. Let's examine it very intelligently, intelligibly, and scientifically. And let's see if I can give you solutions to all these questions which you have. So Bhagavad Gita is an amazing book. It teaches us foundational principles of life. It teaches us how to realize this, not just believe, but how to realize these principles, how to really completely be conscious about these principles every moment of life. And it teaches us what is the direction of our life, what is the ultimate goal of our life, what is the goal of human endeavor and human life, which is ultimately to achieve God and go to the kingdom of God. And how to do this, all this is there. But let's try to see, to read this book and to see for ourselves. Not to become blind believer, but to see it as many, many Russian people did. Impartially reading this, they were completely conversed and convinced that this is the truth. I remember when we started distributing Bhagavad Gita, one lady wrote to me a letter. She said, "Thank you very much for these books. Thank you so much for these books. I am reading Bhagavad Gita every day. And every day when I read Bhagavad Gita, I start crying." And then she says, "Why I start crying? I cannot read Bhagavad Gita for too long because at one point I start crying and I couldn't read any longer." She says, I start inevitably, every day when I read Bhagavad Gita, I cry because at one point this feeling comes to my heart that every word in this book is true. And by recognizing these truths, by coming in contact with these truths, by being amazed how simple is the truth, and at the same time how it is convincing and how it is comprehensive, I cannot stop crying. I just cry. So what I wish you to read Bhagavad Gita and cry every day as this lady, as this simple Russian lady. When I read this letter, I thought, she's very advanced. I'm not as advanced as her. I don't cry when I read Bhagavad Gita. But I'm definitely convinced that every word in this book is true. And not blindly, but because I tried to examine and experiment with this for 40 plus years. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Manish, for the enlightening class. There's comment coming here. It was mind-blowing talk. Very Krishna. Okay, some other Krishna. What is your opinion on anti-material force, its influence on cell biology?
Influence in what?
Cell biology.
Cell biology. I'm not so familiar. I do follow science, but not so closely. There are so many complications in the science. And, I'm mostly interested in neurophysiology, how the connection between the brain and the consciousness, how the consciousness operates the brain. That's my fascination. So I'm not an expert in all these areas. So I honestly speak, sorry. I don't have much opinion.
There are about 60 devotees on Zoom and many questions are coming.
Okay, we can answer a few questions.
This is regarding, you mentioned about giving up the fruits of the work and not being attached to that. There's one devotee is asking, I have dreamt for getting into defense force, and currently I am in the middle of the process. But when I think of the day I will get my joining letter, I become very happy. Is it okay to think like this? If not, how do I detach from this as it was a dream I have been living with?
See, when any of our dreams gets fulfilled, we get initial upsurge of happiness. There is some neurotransmitter, dopamine, and this dopamine is being ejected in the brain, and dopamine gives us some excitement. So you will get dopamine happiness, no problem. But please don't confuse it with the ultimate happiness which we are hankering for. This excitement which is there in the brain, we need it. When we eat good food, we get little dopamine injection. When we fulfill some long cherished dream, more dopamine is coming. But this is very insignificant. This doesn't last long. Let's say you fulfilled your dream. For how long you will be happy? Yes, you will be happy. No doubt about it. But for how long? For the rest of your life? If you would be happy for the rest of your life, all the military generals would be happy for the rest of their life. But they're not. Look at them. They don't look very happy. They look quite morose. If all these people who fulfill their dreams would become happy by fulfilling their dreams, for the rest of their lives. They would be eternally happy. But no, there is some excitement there. So if we are not confused, if we don't confuse this excitement with the happiness which we are hankering for, then this excitement is okay. Yes, I need some little excitement here and there. No problem. But don't make too much out of this excitement. Excitement is not a problem. Our excitement about excitement is a problem. If we are excited about excitement, that's the problem. If we feel that we're excited, we say, okay, yeah, nice, very good. That's good, that's the problem of human life. When we get some happiness, we become overly excited about it. And when we get some unhappiness, we become overly morose about it. Instead of understanding that this is life. Life is about getting excited and getting morose, but we have not much to do with this. Be a little detached from this. So the healthy detachment will make you happy. Actually, it's the detachment which makes you happy, not the attachment which makes you happy. If detachment is there, you will be progressively more and more happy. So don't invest too much into these dreams. Desires should be there. We should do something in this life, but we should not make too much out of this. That's my advice.
Thank you, Maharaj. Another question by Shashwat. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Sir, my question is, we know during Bharatvarsha, during Ramayana time, Russia was part of India and Kaikeyi was from Tracheya Desh, which is in Russia. Sir, how this Sanatana Dharma, which was so widespread, got restricted to India? And what happened in Russia that led to decline of the Sanatana Dharma over there? As of now, we know Prabhu, Sanatana Dharma is fastest growing in Russia.
Well, I'm not sure about Kaikeyi. According to my information, Kaikeyi was from Afghanistan, from Kandahar, from this area, which is closer to Russia. But definitely the Vedic culture was spread in Russia. There is very solid scientific proof to this. Besides linguistic proofs, there is many, the structure of Russian language is very close to Sanskrit language, and there are many roots which are coming from Sanskrit, and there is some archaeological findings there, and there are solid proofs. But the question is, how come Vedic culture shrunk so much and now it is confined to India? It's the way of degradation. We can see that Kali Yuga is progressing, and because Kali Yuga is progressing, the aggressive materialistic culture is actually trampling over Vedic culture. There is an eternal battle between the principles of spiritual culture, principles of God consciousness, and materialistic ideas, materialistic principles. This battle is still going on. But at the same time, people are receptive to Vedic culture all over the world, and especially when they are frustrated in material dreams of happiness. And one of solutions, or one of my answers why Vedic culture is so fastly growing in Russia is that because Russian people don't have too much hopes for material happiness. It's a tough country, it's difficult to live, and therefore they're trying to find alternative solutions. Vedic culture provides alternative solutions. If you have some hopes for material happiness, you will be less inclined to find alternative solutions, because you will still pursue this hope for happiness, for material happiness. But if you become little materially hopeless, Russian people are famous for being hopeless. And therefore they are so receptive to Vedic culture, because Vedic culture gives them some spiritual hope. And when people have immediate material hopes, it's difficult for them to pursue spiritual hopes. But when people don't have too much material hopes, when they become little hopeless, then they can practice spiritual life very nicely. So I wish you to become little hopeless. In a healthy way.
Vishwajit Karmakar is asking, as Guruji talk about preparation for death, we spoke about death preparation. My question is that, is death painful? Or does death happen in one moment, or it's a process?
Dying is painful. Death is not painful. But dying is painful. But the anguish of death, the most important element of the anguish of death is this understanding that we will have to part with all our attachments. Death is basically, death means that everything which we attach to, we are leaving behind. And this is the most painful, psychologically painful. Physically, it may be painful, it may not be painful. Psychologically, it's always painful. Because you're living near and dear people, you're living something which is unfulfilled, some of your desires unfulfilled, you're leaving some of your achievements behind. And if people are attached, it's very painful for them psychologically, because they know that they will have to part with everything which they think they are, everything which constitute their personality. What happens during our lifetime, we build up false persona, false personality. I'm this and I am that. I'm PhD, I'm MD, I'm computer engineer, I'm the wife of such and such husband, I'm this, the son, grandson, this and that. And at the moment of death, all this personality, it becomes completely, destroyed, smashed. And because you don't know who you are besides all these designations, it's very painful. It's very fearful. Why it is fearful? Because you don't know what is there. Why darkness is so fearful? Because when it is dark, people don't know what is there, and therefore they start, imagining something. So the same thing is death. When we live, we have an illusion that we are controlling everything. Everything within our control. We know how to do this. We know how to deal. And all of a sudden, you don't have any control. It's psychologically, it's very shocking. All of a sudden, there is nothing to control. You cannot control anything, and you cannot really do this. That's why death is so painful. But physically, it may not be painful. Psychologically, it will be painful if you are not prepared to this. But many people who had near-death experiences, they explain that it's actually very pleasant. They see their body and they see all these doctors running around the body, and they float and they cannot understand what this commotion is all about, and they're happy, and then, but there are two types of near-death experiences. Some near-death experiences are extremely painful, extremely miserable. And some near-death experiences are very pleasant. And people who have these near-death experiences, pleasant near-death experience, they come back and they become a completely different person, not attached, not so much attached to this world. So there are two types of deaths, painful and pleasant. But pleasant death is a reward for somebody who lived a very good life. If you lived a good life, then your death will also be good. If you lived a bad life, your death will be very bad. So please try to live a good life.
There's a stream of questions coming.
Okay.
There's another question. Apart from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which other Vedic literature should one read? And from where to get authentic copies?
Bhagavad Gita is the foundation, but the next book to understand, much more complex, but at the same time extremely scientific and extremely amazing, is Bhagavad Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam. Other Vedic literature, there are many Vedic literatures like Mahabharata, Ramayana, they are very good. They teach very foundational values of life. They teach very important lessons, how to live in this world. But Bhagavad Gita gives the spiritual foundation to our life. And Srimad Bhagavatam enhances our understanding of spiritual life, gives the very bright and clear picture of the spiritual life in the spiritual world. So that's the next book, most recommendable book, most important book, because we need some spiritual information to be eager to realize our spiritual identity. You know, this Mahabharata is very good, but it mostly teaches us how to live in this world, how to live properly, proper life, dharmic life. That's what Dharma is all about. But Srimad Bhagavatam teaches something which is more higher, how to ultimately realize our spiritual identity and live in the spiritual world. So that's the next book.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Samir was asking, Hare Krishna does really enlightening. We know everything is temporary and perishable, then why mind tends to get tempted towards material things repeatedly, hoping it will give us happiness?
That's the nature of the mind. The mind is actually a material instrument. And that's another amazing feature of Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita not only distinguishes between consciousness and matter, Bhagavad Gita also distinguishes between subtle matter and consciousness. And mind is material. Most of the scientists, many scientists don't believe that mind is the product of matter. But they still confuse consciousness and mind. Bhagavad Gita says, no, there is matter, gross matter, there is subtle matter, which is mind, and there is consciousness, the soul. So, mind is material. Mind is a material instrument which is given to us by God to help us live in this world. And therefore, mind is an instrument which helps us to live in this world, and therefore mind naturally attached to this world. So the solution is not to try to withdraw the mind from the matter, because the mind is naturally, in a very natural way, attached to the matter. The solution is to get detached from the mind. So people are trying to do this. This is very hard austerity to try to detach mind from the matter. But no, this is useless. This is not going to work. We have to detach ourselves from the mind. Not to be attached to the mind and all the joys and pleasures which are there in the mind. Otherwise mind is doing its job very perfectly. It helps us to live in this material world, and to live in this material world we need to be attached. So mind is helping us how to live in this material world, and therefore it naturally gets attached and to something which is necessary, and sometimes to something which is not necessary. It's a complex mechanism, but it's a necessary mechanism. But the idea of yoga is to understand that I'm not the mind. It's little easy to understand that I'm not this body. It's much more difficult to understand that I'm not this mind, because who is thinking? I'm thinking, or the mind is thinking? Who is thinking? I'm thinking. And therefore all the desires which are there, whose desires they are? My desires. And if they are my desires, how I cannot fulfill them? So it's a question of getting the distinction, getting the understanding that we are distinct from the mind. And how to understand that we are distinct from the mind? Again, Krishna gives the solution. Matra sparshas tukantaya shitashna sukha dukkha daha. It says you just tolerate all the happiness and distress which is going on in the mind. Don't take it too seriously. Don't take all the waves which are there in the mind too seriously. Just observe them. And then you will be able to understand that you are the observer. Mind is the actor, and you are the observer of everything which is happening on the scene of the mind.
Thank you, Maharaj, for this very deep insight on detaching oneself from the mind. There is a question by Rajasiri Iyengar. Hare Krishna Maharaj, pranams to you. Is reading Vedic literature and contemplating on Krishna more important than chanting, or vice versa?
Reading Vedic literature is more important than chanting Hare Krishna, or chanting is more important than reading Vedic literature. Both are equally important, because you will not be able to chant Hare Krishna unless you firmly understand the philosophy behind this, the need for this, unless you always reminded why it is, how you should read, chant. And also, reading Vedic literature gives us the fulfillment when we chant Hare Krishna. If we don't read Vedic literature, then the chanting will be very dry. And if we only read Vedic literature but don't chant Hare Krishna, then again we will become dry philosophers. And we will think that just by knowledge we will realize sublime truths of Vedic literature. Chanting Hare Krishna is the practice which is logically derived from the Vedic literature. So if we are convinced about Vedic literature, we should chant and at the same time read. So both are important. Both are integral parts of our sadhana, of our practice.
Thank you, Maharaj. Rajesh, who is asking, Hare Krishna, my question is, how do we know that we are in the process of detachment? And how do we differentiate between superficial detachment and complete detachment?
Superficial or artificial detachment is when you pretend, or when you think that you are detached. And in artificial detachment or superficial detachment, there is always an element of pride. It's being done as a show for others. See how detached I am. I'm so detached. and superficial or artificial detachment is not stable because it's material. The artificial detachment or superficial detachment, it's a mental product. And everything which is mental cannot be stable because mind is always flickering. It's accepting and rejecting. So if you're detached and tomorrow you are attached, it means that you are attached. It means that your so-called detachment which you felt temporarily is just a product of your mind. Srila Prabhupada used to have a phrase, Smasana Vairagya, the Vairagya, detachment on the crematorium. You go to crematorium and for a couple of days you're detached, but then you're again attached. It's a product of the mind, and the product of the mind, any product of the mind is unstable. Real detachment, which is coming from the soul, from the realization of knowledge, which is there in the soul, is stable. It cannot be flickering. It cannot be today you're detached, tomorrow you're attached. So, and how to know this? It's basically, you can know this by your reactions to the events of your life, happenings of your life. If something good happens and you are so elated and you are so happy, or if something bad happened and you are so morose, it means that you are still attached. When nothing happens, you can be detached. But when something really good happens or something really bad happens, then this is a good indicator, how you react to this. If your psychological reaction is very enormously high to all these happenings, it means you're attached. If nothing happens, you may have false idea that I must be very detached because nothing happens. So I'm not attached. So just, wait when something will happen in your life and you will be able to see whether you're detached or not.
Can we take two more?
Yeah, okay.
Kushadev is asking, Hare Krishna, I understand that science and technology cannot answer some of the deeper and fundamental questions about life. But if you see around us, it has provided humanity with a lot of solutions to many practical problems, although it has created many problems, as well as due to the ways humans have come to use and manipulate this technology. But for many noble life-saving technologies, like ones we see in healthcare sectors and others, shouldn't it deserve an appropriate appreciation?
Yeah, we definitely should appreciate the real advancement, definitely. But at the same time, we should understand the limitations of these advancements. Because the important discoveries which are there, like, whatever, we should appreciate them, no doubt about it. But the problem is that the notion behind this sometimes that to all the problems we will get solutions. And as I quoted Albert Einstein, it's a very deep thought that the problem cannot be solved with the same level of consciousness which created the problem. If we deeply examine this statement, we will understand what is the problem with the solutions which are given from the same level or from the same mind which created the problem. It will only complicate the problem. And sometimes we don't notice how the solution immediately, how the solution makes the problem worse, because it gives an illusion of solution. Like, for example, a very simple example, paracetamol. I'm sure everyone used paracetamol. I never used paracetamol. But sometimes it's necessary. But what happens? Paracetamol, it's a good, simple drug which brings down the fever, the temperature of the body. And of course, it's a problem when you have fever, the temperature of the body, and you get little drug, the temperature immediately goes down. But what happens, it doesn't solve the problem, because the initial problem, why the temperature, why the fever is there, its body is fighting with some viruses or some bacteria. And body needs to kill this bacteria. And therefore, the fever goes up. So when we bring the fever down, it gives us relief, psychological relief. We feel a little better. But what happens with the disease remains in the body. We don't give, if the fever is too high, if it's threatening your life, definitely you have to take paracetamol. Sometimes it happens. But if it's like little fever and you're used to have this technological solution to this problem, you only complicate this, because the problem remains and problems becomes worse. And you don't notice it at the moment. You think that you found a solution. It's a simple solution, but it's not a solution. Therefore, even some of the good doctors, they say, like in case of virus, if your fever is not too high, don't take these medicines. If it's really high, then take it. But if it's not too high, tolerate this. So the problem with the technological advancement is that we may not notice immediately the problem which it creates, because the whole world is such a complex system. And usually the scientific solution quite superficial, because it doesn't study deeply the cause and effect chain. It goes to the immediate cause and removes the immediate cause. It doesn't go to the root cause of the problem. So that's why scientific method is faulty, because it usually superficially removes the consequences without going too much to the root. Because there is no scientific means to go to the root cause. But otherwise, definitely, solutions are there. But we also have to see the big picture. What is the big picture? Honestly speaking, are people nowadays more happy than before? No, they're not. They're more, in America, believe it or not, 51% of people are psychiatric patients. They're either depressed, they have some sort of psychiatric disease. And in Europe, it's around 30%. And in India, it's now 15%. So it's a progression going from India. But India is coming in this direction. The modern life makes people crazy. There's so much anxiety, so much tension, so much depression because of the tension and anxiety there. This is what modern life is all about, and it's just no end to this, and no solution. And it's very artificial. Before that, people would go to grocery shop and would get some natural products, some vegetables and whatever. Now they have to go to special organic shops to get organic vegetables, and to pay so much price for this. Before that, it was all organic. Now everything is artificial because the solution is there. Fertilizers are there. But now you have to go to special shop to get special organic food, and otherwise you just take fertilizers and become chemically advanced by taking too much chemistry every day. So we have to see the bigger picture, not just single advancement.
Thank you. We take one more question, last one. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, if I leave my family and material world for my Lord Sri Hari, how far it is right or wrong? I want always to be near my Lord Sri Hari.
He wants to live.
If I leave my home, family, and material world for seeing my Lord Hari, is it right or wrong?
Well, it really depends. There is no single and simple answer to this question because it really depends on many, many factors of your life. If this desire to be with God and to serve God is genuine, it's definitely right, but at the same time, the process of detaching from the family also has to be very, it has to be gradual. In most cases, because sometimes this spirit of detachment comes to us, it's artificial detachment, sometimes also, we have obligations. So it's better, in Vedic tradition, Sanatana Dharma teaches ultimately renunciation or detachment. But it's also a gradual process of detachment. You first are trained as a brahmachari, then you are a family man, then you gradually detach from the family life, and then ultimately you become sannyasi and completely detached. So in a normal scenario of life, it's a gradual process, and in most cases it requires gradual process. And even if it is, in some cases, it can be more rapid because you already passed through all these stages in your previous lives, and in this life you have this calling and feeling. But even in this case, you need the blessings of all this near and dear. Without their blessings, it will be very difficult for you to maintain detachment. In the Vedic culture, this tradition was firmly established. If you wanted to detach, you first have to get the blessings. Even Lord Ramachandra, before going to forest, he had the order of his father Dasharatha and Kaikeyi. He goes to Kaushalya and says, I need your blessings to go to the forest. Without your blessings, I cannot go. So we should be dependent on the blessings, especially on the blessings of our protectors, those who care about us. And if they're reluctant to give us blessings, then we have to prove to them that we're serious in this desire and ultimately get their blessings. It's possible. So, but there could be exceptions. But the general rule is like this. We should not be in a hurry, and we should try to get blessings of those people who are, whom we are obliged to. Okay?
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for the talk. Because we have some announcements.
Yeah. So, thank you everyone for attending this session and taking your time. So for new people who are joined for the time for first time, we are starting 6-session course of called Discovery Yourself. These sessions will help you understand and read Bhagavad Gita, give you a basics of Bhagavad Gita. This we are starting in the first week of May. So those who are interested and eager, please join the WhatsApp group. We have put the link to the chat. So we will pass on other information there.
Hare Krishna. So we also thank His Holiness Bhakti Goswami Maharaj for taking out his time and giving wonderful association. We are just hearing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Maharaj, today also to hear very scientific angle, scientific side, with such conviction, and also all the answers, questions we answered were very amazing. So we have to thank Maharaj before the heart by chanting Hare Krishna mantra.